Yes, and of course tonight we have the final chapter in our 13 Investigates special report on a Capital Region woman who says the abuse she suffered at the hands of her psychiatrist at St. Peter's Addiction Recovery Center left her depressed, demoralized, and on the verge of relapse.
Let's begin with a recap. On Tuesday, we introduced you to Dawn McGrath. McGrath who kicked a fentanyl addiction, is suing the doctor by the name of Clarence White and St. Peter's for being subjected to what she calls a frightening profanity-laced tirade by White, all because she wanted to reschedule an appointment.
Then on Wednesday, we told you how her decision to take legal action against White led her to being hastily graduated, quote unquote, from St. Peter's recovery program, despite the fact she was in the middle of a crisis and engaging in self-harm. Finally, tonight, we take a closer look at Dr. White and a past that may leave you asking, how did this happen? For that, we head to 13 Investigates' Tessa Bentulin. Tessa.
Rachel, Elaine, the good news is Dawn McGrath is doing well, 5 years clean and sober and under the care of a new psychiatrist. The bad news, the New York State statute that prevents anyone from knowing about a doctor under health department investigation is still on the books, but that may change if one lawmaker has his way.
This is Clarence White's 2002 graduation photo from Meharry Medical College in Tennessee. It's a 20-year-old photo that still makes Dawn McGrath shudder. Dawn says in March of 2018, White verbally assaulted and harassed her while she was a client at St. Peter's Addiction Recovery Center, SPARC.
Telling me to go F myself. I'm an effing loser. I'm an effing junkie. Who do I think I am? I think my time's more important than his. Something in my brain just clicked and shut down, and it shut me down.
They allowed a monster into her life that completely flipped her world upside down.
The encounter prompted a lawsuit, and while it's a disturbing account to be sure, it was not the first time this psychiatrist found himself at the center of controversy. According to recently released records, in 2017, while working at Cayuga Medical Center in Ithaca, White had a social and sexual relationship with a psychiatric patient in his care, a relationship that ultimately got him fired.
A complaint was also filed with the Department of Health's Office of Professional Medical Conduct, which launched an investigation. But as OPMC was gathering its facts, White landed another job, this time at St. Peter's. So who knew about White's past? Well, that depends on who you ask.
As part of Dawn McGrath's lawsuit, both Melissa Weimer, who was then the head of St. Peter's Behavioral Health, and Clarence White gave sworn statements about the doctor's disclosure. Dawn's lawyer, Greg Teresi, asked if Dr. White had disclosed to you that he had a complaint filed against him at his previous employer, would you have had a discussion about that? Weimer says if he had any complaints, we would have discussed that. Yes. Teresi also asked, and if an applicant had disclosed with you there was a complaint related to having inappropriate relationships with a patient, is that somebody that you would have considered for hiring? Weimer says no. But in Clarence White's deposition, he maintained he disclosed his termination from Cayuga Medical Center. Teresi asked, did St. Peter's ever ask if you've ever been terminated from a job? White says, I'm sure they did. Teresi then says, and what was your response? White says, I believe I documented that I had been. Teresi asks, and when you say you believe that you documented it, how did you document it? White follows up with, when you check on the application, these are standard questions that they have in all applications. Any boards, discipline, insurance claims against, malpractice claims against you. And you just have to answer honestly to them. Teresi asked, and did they ask you to elaborate? How were you terminated or why were you terminated? White says, not that I recall. Teresi asked, it never came up in the interview with Dr. Weimer? White says no, sir.
Regardless of what St. Peter's did or didn't do to vet Clarence White, it would have been nearly impossible to find out about his prior termination and inappropriate conduct, or that his license was likely in jeopardy. That's because disciplinary hearings by OPMC are in secret until their conclusion, which in this case took more than 2 years.
It's not a Department of Health decision. It's a state statute, one that may need a second look.
I think any reasonable person could understand that. You know, it's one thing to be accused of something, It's another thing to be found guilty, and everybody wants to have that due process.
Assemblyman John McDonald, a member of the Assembly Health Committee and a licensed pharmacist, says it's a tough situation. False allegations against doctors are not uncommon, and a reputation could be ruined by a baseless accusation. Still, he says a potential employer needs some leeway.
The process, at least in this situation, from the depositions I've read, have put the prospective employer at a disadvantage. You know, we are evaluating language to see if we can make a difference in this area. This case has definitely, you know, caused enough concern that when we know that we have an extreme need for providers out there, we want employers to have every tool accessible to make that right decision. I think in this situation, the employer was kind of blinded a little bit.
After White's license was revoked in New York in 2020, he was immediately suspended in Virginia. Shortly after his revocation here, he appealed his suspension in Virginia, but was denied. The Board of Medicine citing what it called poor medical judgment, including excessive prescription of stimulants, inappropriate comments to substance abuse patients, as well as anger issues. And that patient that White had a sexual relationship with in Ithaca has since died.